the setup, chapter 1, we saw the king, throwing a big feast, and the queen, he asked the queen in, which was atypical. She had her own feast going on. The women and the men were segregated, but he asked her in, basically to show her off. Women love attention, but she didn't obey his orders, so she got fired. Now this is ancient Persia. Kings have been known to execute queens, even in more recent history, but she was not executed. It doesn't even really say she was divorced. She just lost her position of queen, and this is a prominent position. It's important, actually, and it's also a privilege. So she's more or less in exile within the courts. Her sentence was that she will never appear before the king again. Bear in mind that the king here is a figure of Christ the King, a type of Christ the King, and Vashti was a type of his bride, his queen. So she has been displaced. And then we enter into chapter 2. I'll start with the first 4 verses. After these things, when the wrath of King Ahasuerus subsided, he remembered Vashti, what she had done, and what had been decreed against her. Then the king's servants who attended him said, "Let beautiful young virgins be sought for the king, and let the king appoint officers in all the provinces of his kingdom, that they may gather all the beautiful young virgins to Shushan, the citadel, into the women's quarters, under the custody of Hegai, the king's eunuch, custodian of the women, and let beauty preparations be given them. Then let the young woman who pleases the king be queen instead of Vashti." This thing pleased the king, and he did so. Okay, so he remembers Vashti. This could mean that he regrets doing what he did, or he may just say, "You know what? I don't have a queen. We need a queen here. Let's do something about that." He's not lonely. I mean, we'll see later on that he has a harem, so it's not like he's wanting for female companionship. He be the king. It's good to be king, but he needs the queen. The queen is an important position throughout the history of royalty. The queen's main function is to provide a legitimate heir. So this may be behind this too. He still needs a queen, some woman in whom he finds favor, who will supply an heir, a legitimate heir. Yeah.
I know I said this last week, but I really like this king. In times past when I've read this story, I either had the impression or the impression was given to me that the king was just kind of a bumbling idiot, sort of this Joe Biden puppet who never really ever makes a decision himself.
The Sultan from Aladdin.
But this guy is not that way at all.
No.
I mean, he is really opening himself up to more possible humiliation for the good of the state, because the state needs a queen. Mm-hmm. Right? He could have just easily said, "We don't need a queen.
I'm done with
I've
this.
got my concubines. I'm not going to open myself up to any further humiliation." But he knows that the state would be better with that sort of presence. So
and the fact that he's really level-headed is to his favor. He's also takes counsel.
Yes.
He's not just a unilateral martinet.
I mean, he gets angry, but he's not impulsive.
So I think the king comes off pretty well, actually, and he's being presented here as a type of the Godhead.
Yeah.
So he is going to seem kind of remote, kind of distant.
Yeah.
It's everybody goes through this, and we've got a very obvious example in front of us from the last couple of days in Texas. Where is God in all this? Well, he's right there, and he's weeping along with everybody. But he never once promised to fix the fall. until he returns, until Christ returns. That's what the promise is. And our duty is to continue on the work of the recapitulation, of continuing to bring the creation under the headship of Christ. He did it through suffering. We do it through suffering. We fulfill what's lacking in his suffering. It's because we are his body on earth in our own time and place. So why'd you have?
I was just going to ask you, and you may be planning on getting into this, but what are some evidences that he is a Christ figure, a king here?
That's what the whole book is about.
Okay. All right. Cool.
Well, in the first chapter, he was sort of a king among kings. You know, he had this great, banquet.
Yeah, actually emperor.
Yeah, and all of these other, royalties from other nations are there,
Yeah. Yeah, a good example of this is during Christ's time. It was the Roman Empire. Caesar was in charge, yet they had a King Herod. He was a vassal king, and so this is the same situation. All of Ahasuerus' vassal kings are part of the celebration, and we'll see that again come up here in just a minute. His kind of respect that he shows to these vassal kings. All right, 5-7. In Shushan, the citadel, there was a certain Jew whose name was Mordecai, the son of Jair, the son of Shimei, the son of Kish, a Benjamite. Kish had been carried away from Jerusalem with the captives who had been captured with Jeconiah, king of Judah, whom Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, had carried away. And Mordecai had brought up Hadassah, that is Esther, his uncle's daughter, for she had neither father nor mother. The young woman was lovely and beautiful. When her father and mother died, Mordecai took her as his own daughter. All right, so this is the genealogy of the key players here, the key Jewish players. Now, the name Hadassah, her Jewish name, means myrtle, and the myrtle shows up elsewhere in Scripture. And I've got a couple of references to read to you here. Isaiah 41, 19. This is God talking. I will plant in the wilderness the cedar and acacia tree, the myrtle and the oil tree. I will set in the desert the cypress tree and the pine and the box tree together. So there we've got a myrtle. We also have it in Isaiah 55, 13. Instead of the thorn shall come up the cypress tree, and instead of the briar shall come up the myrtle tree, and it shall be to the Lord for a name, for an everlasting sign that shall not be cut off. All right, so we see the myrtle here as being part of the blessing of the restoring of God's people. And you go from, just myrtle trees growing in the land here to the myrtle tree being an everlasting sign that will not be cut off. So we're getting into more meaning here. Then we get to Zechariah, which is all the way almost to the end of the Old Testament. And it's chapter 1, verses 8 through 11. I saw by night, and behold, a man riding on a red horse, and it stood among the myrtle trees in the hollow, and behind him were horses, red, sorrel, and white. Then I said, My Lord, what are these? So the angel who talked with me said to me, I will show you what they are. And the man who stood among the myrtle trees answered and said, These are the ones whom the Lord has sent to walk to and fro throughout the earth. So they answered the angel of the Lord who stood among the myrtle trees and said, We have walked to and fro throughout the earth, and behold, all the earth is resting quietly. So, without trying to interpret this passage too deeply, we see here a grove of myrtle trees, and the man on the horse is taken to be Christ. So he is among the myrtle trees in this vision, and he finds the earth to be quiet. And the church fathers agree that the grove of myrtle trees here is the church. This is Christ among his church.
What chapter are you in?
That's chapter 1,
Chapter 1 of Zechariah.
8 through 11.
Okay. Thank you.
So we have this growing use of the myrtle here throughout prophecy. And so this is another indication that Hadassah, myrtle, is a figure of the church.
Did the Jews consider that a figure of Israel too before?
I have no idea
Okay.
what the Jewish...
Okay.
I mean, everything is about Israel and the land
Yeah.
in Jewish interpretation,
True.
so that's probably a safe bet,
Yeah.
but I don't know really for sure. So we've got Esther. Her name is Hadassah, which means myrtle, but her given name or her Persian name is Esther, which is derived from Ishtar. So that's why I was going through Ishtar the first week. Ishtar was the queen of heaven, but the queen of heaven is the church. The queen of heaven is the bride of the king. The king is Christ. The queen is the church. So Esther, again, she's the queen of the king. She is the queen in typology. She is the queen of heaven. She is the church. So we've got kind of a Celtic knot here of different references that all land on Esther being a figure of the church. But not only that, she is the church in glory. We have another figure of the church in this story, and that is Mordecai. Mordecai is a figure of the church in suffering, and we won't get to that this week, but we will get there. So I'll open it up. What else can we say about Mordecai here, just from this one passage?
He seems to be a pretty shrewd guy.
Yeah. We'll get. He becomes more shrewd as the chapter
Yeah,
goes on.
Yeah.
Well,
And I mean that in a positive way.
oh yeah. He's discerning.
Yeah.
Very much.
He is Esther's kinsman redeemer. This is very literal. She's his cousin. It appears like he's probably much older than her, but she is orphaned, and he takes her as her own daughter. That's the kinsman redeemer. So what you got, Jim?
That's it.
Oh, okay. All right, I thought you had some. All right, 8 through 11. So it was, when the king's command and decree were heard, and when many young women were gathered at Shushan, the citadel, under the custody of Haggai, that Esther was also taken to the king's palace into the care of Haggai, the custodian of the women. Now the young woman pleased him, and she obtained his favor, so he readily gave beauty preparations to her, besides her allowance. Then 7 choice maidservants were provided for her from the king's palace, and he moved her and her maidservants to the best place in the house of the women. Esther had not revealed her people or family, for Mordecai had charged her not to reveal it. And every day Mordecai paced in front of the court of the women's quarters to learn of Esther's welfare and what was happening to her. Okay, so you may have noticed, again, we have the number 7. She gets 7 maidservants. The number 7 came up repeatedly in the first chapter, and that pattern is still ongoing. And Mordecai had told her, she is more or less kidnapped here. When the king orders you to come, as Vashti learned, you come. But Mordecai had told her, don't let on that you're Jewish. This is part of his discernment. One thing that we see here about Mordecai is he's not a zealot. He is not a revolutionary, looking to overthrow the empire. He wants to live quietly among his neighbors. If you can, live quietly within your community. this is one of the ways that he is wise, shrewd in a wise way.
A wise person always seeks peace, and that's
Yeah.
that's what he's doing here.
Mhm.
He's living life in peace. It's the ideal life,
Yeah.
man.
So, telegraphing a little bit, as long as his core principles are not being forced violation, he's okay. He's cool.
Well, he's not only peaceable, but he's also he's wise in the sense that he can get inside people's heads and know what they're thinking. He understands that the king has turned this whole thing into a morale boost for the kingdom, because the king could have just pulled a concubine and promoted her, and that would have been the end of it. But the king's going out of this way to do this whole theatrical thing as a morale boost for the kingdom. It's a big theater that's going to make the whole kingdom like it's
It's like a big beauty pageant.
yeah, it's like the kind of political theater we see today.
It's politics.
Yeah, it's politics.
And his campaign managers, told him this is the thing to do, and he said, "You know what? You're right."
And so Mordecai knows that the queen has to be Persian, because that's the only way this is going to go. They're going to end up with a Persian queen, not a quote unquote illegal.
Right. Well, that's actually one of the criticisms of this story.
Yeah.
By late academics, that the king would never have married a non-Persian, so the story's probably just made up. Well, like everything else, put forth by scoffers, it's very easy to disprove. All you have to do is look at text. He didn't know she was Jewish.
Right.
Yeah.
This also ups the ante of the danger that she will be in.
Right.
She knew that if she went before the king without being invited, then her life might be forfeit.
Yeah.
Well, guess what? Even if he brings her in, she's going to reveal she's Jewish. That adds to the danger. So she's not. She could be killed just for being Jewish who took on royalty.
Yes.
Now, who does that remind you of? That's Christ-like.
Yeah.
His enemies told the Romans, he says he's king.
Yeah.
You can't let him live with that. All right. So we also see here that Mordecai remains faithful to his responsibility toward Esther, and this we can apply this to the church as well. Mordecai is us. He's the church in suffering, but in a way we are serving the church in glory. We want to be found worthy to be that glorified bride. So in a way, this is reflects the responsibility that Mordecai continues for Esther. Always wanting to know how she's doing. What's going on behind the citadel walls. All right, 12 through 14. Each young woman's turn came to go into King Ahasuerus after she had completed 12 months' preparation, according to the regulations for the women. For thus were the days of their preparation apportioned: 6 months with oil of myrrh, and 6 months with perfumes and preparations for beautifying women. Thus prepared, each young woman went to the king, and she was given whatever she desired to take with her from the women's quarters to the king's palace. In the evening she went, and in the morning she returned to the second house of the women, to the custody of Shaashgaz. I don't know why that name didn't, really click with people. The king's eunuch who kept the concubines. Well, it's because he's the eunuch. Okay. She would not go in to the king again unless the king delighted in her and called for her by name. So this is the beginning of this, of revealing this thing that you could only go into the king if you were invited, called by name. So we see here that Esther is made beautiful, and it is at the king's direction and expense. So, what do we know from the writings of Paul about that? What can we extrapolate there? We can turn to Ephesians 5:27. Let's start at 25. Husbands, love your wives, just as Christ also loved the church and gave himself for her, that he might sanctify and cleanse her with the washing of water by the word, that he might present her to himself a glorious church, not having spot or wrinkle or any such thing, but that she should be holy and without blemish. So Christ's work in us is beautifying us. He is beautifying his bride. And this is what Ahasuerus is doing to a multitude of women, but in most specifically with Esther. So, any thoughts about that? Well, all right then. 15 through 20. Now, when the turn came for Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her as his daughter, to go in to the king, she requested nothing but what Haggai, the king's eunuch, the custodian of the women, advised. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all who saw her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his royal palace in the 10th month, which is the month of Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. The king loved Esther more than all the other women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins. So he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Then the king made a great feast, the feast of Esther, for all his officials and servants, and he proclaimed a holiday in the provinces and gave gifts according to the generosity of a king. Okay, so not only is Esther beautified, she is discipled. The head eunuch tells her what she ought to take with her as she goes in to present herself to the king, and she obeys. You know, she has learned. She's being taught and she has learned. So, discipleship. And she finds favor, and she's chosen from the multitude, and she receives a wedding feast. Do y'all's other translations call it the Feast of Esther?
What
verse?
verse?
That's 18.
Yeah, it was Esther's feast. The ESV says
Feast of Esther. Yeah, mine says that.
Okay.
Mine's a Septuagint. By the way, it also has Artaxerxes as the king.
Right.
Septuagint. Okay.
Yeah.
It should say it's Ishtar's feast, right?
I don't know. I mean, if it's Esther in the Septuagint, I would guess that it's Esther.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah. Again, the names are related. Yeah, the Artaxerxes is used in the Septuagint throughout. There were 4 different kings who called themselves Artaxerxes, so it's hard to know which one.
Yeah.
I don't know how much. I mean, it identifies him in the first verses as, you know, this is the one who ruled, and it gives the borders of the empire.
Yeah.
I don't know how much that changed.
Yeah.
Did you have something, Nick?
No, I was just saying, in the ESV it says it's Esther's feast. Yeah, that's all I had.
Okay, well, that's
I
cool.
don't wanna jump ahead, any other points you might have?
So, she is now in her full typology. This is after the wedding feast. And she is secure as queen of the empire, queen of all the world, as far as those people are concerned.
Actually, it might not be Ishtar's feast because it gives the month, and it's a cold season month.
Yeah, that's what
Ishtar's
I was
feast would have been
thinking
in June, so yeah, probably.
Okay. Just Esther's feast. She
Just
gets her own feast.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting that the Jews have a feast based on this story, Purim. They call it Purim, which is about casting lots. They don't call it the Feast of Esther. So they don't celebrate her wedding. They celebrate the evil stuff that comes up. It's kind of weird. Okay, where am I at? Esther is on the inside with the king. She may never leave the courts again, ever. She may not be allowed out. And Mordecai is on the outside. So, inside the walls, outside the walls. So, she's the church in glory. He's the church in suffering. separated from the king, but they still have this unbreakable bond based on godly principles, which will come up later on. But it's very similar to Daniel. Daniel is serving in the courts of Nebuchadnezzar, and they want him to apparently eat all sorts of non-kosher food, and he says, no, begging your pardon, but let me just eat vegetables, and see how we do here. And they do fine. So very gently pushing back against things that violate their core principles.
Who do you have in your allegorical interpretation? What do you have to say about the eunuch? Is he a type of anything? Because he's a pretty important character.
Yeah, I'm not. He may be an angel. He might represent angels.
That's
without
that's what I was wondering.
who do not get married or given in marriage. That
But
kind of thing.
what help in the story?
Yeah. I mean, Paul tells us flatly that I think it's Paul that angels serve mankind.
Mm-hmm.
So this is definitely what he's doing with what he's doing for Esther.
Yeah.
I may have gotten ahead of myself there. Let's go ahead and do 21 through 23. Or did I go down to 20?
No, we've not read 19 yet.
Okay, let's do 19 through 23. When the virgins were gathered together a second time, Mordecai sat within the king's gate. There he is outside the wall. Now Esther had not revealed her family and her people, just as Mordecai had charged her. For Esther obeyed the command of Mordecai as when she was brought up by him. So there you have, there's the principles. He brought her up the right way, stick to that, and this is what she did. So there's the bond of the core principles. I thought I was ahead of myself. Okay, in those days, while Mordecai sat within the king's gate, two of the king's eunuchs, Bigthan and Teresh, doorkeepers, became furious and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. So the matter became known to Mordecai, who told Queen Esther, and Esther informed the king in Mordecai's name. And when an inquiry was made into the matter, it was confirmed, and both were hanged on a gallows, and it was written in the book of the Chronicles in the presence of the king. Okay, so Mordecai waits at the gate to serve his king and his queen now. Here I'm going to invoke Psalm 123, verse 2. Behold, as the eyes of servants look to the hand of their masters, and the eyes of a maid to the hand of her mistress, so our eyes look to the Lord our God until he has mercy on us. This is what a servant does. A servant just stands and waits, and he looks for any little sign, any little word before he goes into action. Always prepared to serve, but always waiting for that moment. And this is what Mordecai is doing there in the gate. Not just Ahasuerus, but also his cousin Esther. So again, we see here the importance of authority, or of submitting to our authorities. He is not a zealot. He sees a conspiracy against the king, and he's not eager to join it. He rats them out. He wants to serve his king now, perhaps even more than before, because Esther is so closely connected to him now. So he's not a revolutionary. We have established that. He is not looking to make trouble or to help anybody who is making trouble. And in the end, so he saves the king. He serves the king by saving his life. And in the end, his name is written in a book. So what can we say about that?
It's good to have your name written in the book of the king.
Indeed. Revelation 13:8. All who dwell on the earth will worship him, whose names have not been written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. This is worshiping the Antichrist, those whose names are not written in the book. But when it comes to judgment time, it's going to be whether your name is in there or not. Revelation 20:12, and I saw the dead, small and great, standing before God, and books were opened. And another book was opened, which is the book of life. And the dead were judged according to their works by the things which were written in the books. So, not only is there a book of life, but there is also a book of works. And these will all be evil works, just in case people need to know. It's not just unbelief. Unbelief is the key issue here, but also works will be exposed. So,
Sorry, just to this point in the text today from the sermon, final verse we won't look at it deeply, but Jesus makes a comment to the disciples about rejoicing that your name is written in heaven.
Yeah.
So don't rejoice that you have power over the principalities. Rejoice that your name is written in heaven.
yeah, exactly. That's the bottom line.
Well, but yeah, that ties so well with this because Mordecai is like the disciple because he actually does win out over these conspirators, these sort of false principalities.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, to use the analogy of the eunuch being an angel, these are two fallen angels,
Yeah.
who deviated from their purpose. They try to overthrow the king,
Yeah.
it fails. Now Mordecai has more influence and more power because of it,
Right.
but he doesn't rejoice in that. He rejoices just that
Yeah.
the story
He's
turned
found
out
favor with
okay.
the king.
But the king still doesn't know he has any connection to Esther.
Yeah.
Although he did communicate through her somehow. That will come up later. That will be clear later. And I would say that this is another testimony against the moral exemplar. Having a good moral example doesn't get your name written in the book.
No.
So anyway, just to beat that dead horse. All right, well, this is a great place to stop. We'll pick up again next week in chapter 3. So I'm glad we can have a